Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to the end of season one of In the Clouds with Red Hat Leadership. I'm joined by the one and only Matt Hicks. Uh, you recently were promoted to Executive Vice President of Products and Technologies. So you have quite a bit under you, it sounds like, from the Red Hat perspective. You want to
Yeah,
kind of explain, how you got here, and what you're doing now as products and technology EVP, right? Like, not a lot of people might understand that, like, organizational breakdown.
yeah, no, sure thing, Chris. So I've been at Red Hat forever. Like I've been here for I think about 15 years. So I've done a lot in Red Hat.
Right.
But when we talk about products and technologies, it's a combination of engineering, our CTO office, and our business unit. So everything that sort of goes into making products at Red Hat, supporting them, uh, looking at that from the business side as well as what we're building, and then obviously the open source engagement is a huge part of that. But a little background, I mean, actually, I started in Red Hat on the IT side.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a bunch of roles before, but that's actually where I first started was a really like a user of a lot of the Red Hat technologies in IT,
Right.
and I'd
Yeah.
sort of say like I did about everything there was to do in IT, and then I jumped to engineering about 8 years ago. And I've always done this like manager, individual contributor swing back and forth. Now I think I'm sort of a permanent
Yeah,
manager
you're on that path now. Yeah.
at this point, but I love coding. Like that's still my draw, my favorite thing for it. But it's been a blast. It's been 15 fantastic years. But that's what I do day to day now is sort of in that balance of where are we investing a
Hmm.
few years out, what do we have on the truck right now, and what's working, what do we need to improve with customers.
Right. And that kind of leads me, one thing I've learned about Red Hat since working here, it's rare that coming to Red Hat is the first time you've worked with a Red Hat
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
So, what was like your introduction to Red Hat? Right, like mine was like old Red Hat Linux, five something way back in the day.
yeah.
What was yours? Out of
It,
curiosity.
So it's funny. I had a weird, like, two-pronged introduction to Red Hat. So I was an early Linux user in the late 90s. So, at the time where you're like,
Hmm.
compile your own kernel, and if video and audio works, it's a miracle, like you did
It's
Sonora. So
great.
that
Yeah. No,
was
I
the
remember those days. Yeah.
the time period that I was really jumping into it. And that led me to Red Hat Linux on that. So the
Hmm.
box distro by
Yeah.
probably from Best Buy at the
Yep.
time.
That's where I
Uh,
got mine.
it really so that uh it's making me feel a little bit old talking about that. But my second wave into Red Hat was I was actually in consulting. I was in IBM Global Services at the time. And so you can imagine like I'm this Linux guy. Like my thing is to go make these deployments work with
Hmm.
Linux. Like whatever, no matter how many non-billable hours I'm gonna have to put in. Like that's sort of the passion you see in Linux. Like I'm gonna make this work over the
Right.
Unix variants. And I ended up deploying RHEL 2.1, which happened to be the first release of RHEL. So I was like
Oh, okay.
Red Hat Linux user. And then, I ended up as a job going out, and it was with ISV Solutions, deploying, setting up RHEL 2.1. And that
Wow.
I loved it. Like it was really, it was like, oh, this is like the passion I have for this open source software, getting to play out and making it work at customers. So that was my first foray into Red Hat when I was part of IBM at the time.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, we were building, a dial-up, data center based on Red Hat Linux, right? Like, so,
Yeah.
the old ISP days where you dialed in on a modem
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
connect to the internet. That's where I was using Linux as a consumer, essentially a customer. Yeah, that's awesome, right? Like, I love that story. The fact that you're using RHEL 2.1. Um, what are some of those like lessons learned along the way that you feel like have stuck with you even till now, right? Like deploying Linux everywhere, right? Like I know you're a very technical person. I know you're very hands-on. So I'm super curious, like what skills you feel like still apply today.
The lesson I take in it's in sort of the art of Red Hat. If can we channel this is
Mm,
uh, the reason I know, and I've thought about this a lot of the years, like, why did I gravitate to this thing so much? And then
right.
Linux sparked a passion for open source. And it was because I can influence this. Like I can make
Mm-hmm.
this better if I put in the time. I can patch this software and improve it. And it's similar to like the Stallman printer story that you'll hear. It's like, uh, as a consultant, I love that empowerment for it.
Right.
And that actually, like, you're a consultant. What was the next big wave? It was Java. I had the same draw to JBoss and Hibernate. Um,
Mm,
because if I hit an issue, I could go figure it out myself. Like I didn't have to be beholden to support. And then like,
right.
if I really put in the effort, I could patch or fix or understand it.
Yeah.
And I never want to lose sight of like, if you can connect to people's passion there, uh, it's a really powerful movement. Like that, seeing what Linux has been able to do, seeing what open source has been able to do, that spark that I've had individually on it, I'm like, that's the industry spark I don't want to lose. Like, doesn't matter how
Right.
you could be the best proprietary model in the world, but I think if you land that spark with people, open source is just going to win because of that, because it's got a really wide reach of people like myself that we're gonna
Yeah.
put in a heck of a lot of hours, not even getting paid for it, just to make it work, make it get better.
Yeah. And the openness of Linux
Yeah.
and then of Red Hat Linux itself was just refreshing at the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
for me, right? Like, because I mean, we probably discovered it around the same time, right? Given the release numbers I'm hearing. So like, yeah, being able to just open a file and
Yeah.
change whatever I want and then just restart a service and boom, it's going to work how I want. Like that was super empowering at the time. And we don't
Right.
think about it like that anymore, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like just standard now, right? Like that's what we expect. It's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, and I'll tell you the probably the accelerator for me was actually Robert Love's book on the 2.6 kernel. And
Mm,
it was because I was fascinated with the Linux kernel itself. And I read the 2.4 book, which like it was okay. And then Robert Love's book came out just on Linux development. And that was like, it added this whole, I was already, stuck on the openness, the ability to change. And then he brought this just deep explanation of what went behind it. And that for me was like, I usually have that book in my background of, because it was so influential. I was like, wow, there's no going back because you can
right.
learn so much from this. And it was like right time in my career, like really pulled me into software on that.
Awesome. So, you've got this leadership position and one thing that I'd like to address, we began the year looking bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and ready to take on the year ahead, and then
Yeah.
this thing happened called COVID-19. How are we in product and technologies, how have we adjusted to better help our customers? And if you have any examples, that'd be great too, right? Like,
Yeah, I think there are a lot. One side, I'm very thankful being at Red. One, I'm thankful being in tech because I think you look at tech and it was in this weird bubble in the industry where we're sort of almost like unaffected to uh, in a position to be able to help. So that was nice. And then you
right.
go to Red Hat where we are 60% probably in engineering already remote and
Mm-hmm.
distributed, and we work distributed and work in open source. And it was stunning to me of like having everyone across the world sort of like forced sent home. We didn't really miss a beat. So I think we actually started from a pretty lucky perspective on this. Um, but then the challenge with customers is they weren't all this lucky of like,
Right.
how do you engage with them when sales can't talk to them? Or for us, like even my default would be, we're a support company. Like if a customer's having a problem,
Mm-hmm.
put people on planes, get them out there. We can solve anything.
Right.
And so we had to do just a lot of refinement in terms of like in that critical issue, how do you go circle teams together and have engineering and support and consultants working hand in hand? Like when you can't be on site, you can't, it's not a dial-up data center anymore, but like still like getting the fact of getting people together works through stuff quicker, I think. And so that was probably the biggest adjustment for us was just getting virtual teams connected to be able to get customers through issues and challenges. And that I think we're very lucky in that being our biggest challenge. Our roadmap, our strategy didn't have to change. The way we engaged in software didn't have to change. Uh, but really making sure we could still do our job and keeping customers whole was it was a challenge. Like,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
I think it was we were in a very lucky starting point to be able to do that. There's refinement rather than reinvent the business.
Right. Like a lot of businesses had to kind of refactor themselves.
Yep.
And, my wife, she's on the board of my son's preschool, and like just listening to the conversations they had to have early on was just like, wow, this school that's been around for 75 years might not make it.
Yeah.
And like that
Yeah.
to me was
Yeah.
crazy, right? Like, but pulled things up, the nose turned up on that one pretty quickly, So like that upheaval, being in Google Meet or Teams or WebEx or whatever, no travel kind of deal. It threw my team for a loop, obviously, because look what we're doing now. We're doing all this live streaming, right? So we're trying to reach out to customers in better, more virtual ways and more conveniently accessible ways, and that's why we stream to more than one channel, obviously. Um, from the year, right? Like as this is the last show of the year, what's one customer story that sticks out to you that you're proud of?
Well, probably if I have to pick there, and there were a bunch of these, but this one was sort of early on, and I think it was indicative of what's possible. So it was, I won't mention the customer specifically, but it was in this
Sure.
class of like a traditional, commerce type scenario that just stopped for them. It was like,
oh no,
nobody's coming. And they had always had like, hey, we've got to make this shift to e-commerce and digital. Like, and actually a lot of companies like we have to digitally transform.
right?
And it was like the preschool story. Like, well, that it was going to take us a year, and we will not make a year on this. Like, you can't just stop everything coming in, and that's all we have. And we were already a customer. We'd already worked with them pretty close. And we actually switched them to basically like e-commerce online delivery in 7 days.
Wow.
And literally, I'm like a couple months prior, this was like, and a year was maybe maybe 3. And the fact, and it stuck with me because this was like March or April. I'm like, if you put your mind to something, and there is no, I'm thinking of like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, like there's no plan B. This is like, there is no plan B on this. What you can accomplish was pretty incredible. And I was like, this was really, for me, it was neat because like I was proud that Red Hat technology could deliver that fast and get a company to be amazing. From like, yeah, like I might be shutting my doors to, I've got a chance in this, like I've reinvented, and then to pull something in from that close is was pretty cool. So that was an early on one. And then I've seen a bunch of these examples where and it's made me think like, if your back's up against the wall and you really, we should stretch our belief of what is actually possible. Like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That should be my
absolutely.
takeaway.
This year has shown us what is possible when you put your mind to it, right? Like the fact that we've gone from, oh my gosh, there's a coronavirus out there too. Hey, we're vaccinating people in less than 12 months is just mind-blowing to me in and of itself. All the other things that came along with that, like the story you just mentioned, is absolutely amazing. But we have a question from the audience.
Yeah.
You're going to appreciate this one. What is the next piece of gear Matt is going to get to continue to step up his streaming game?
This, like, don't ask my wife that. She would tell you, like, there is nothing left to get. But I will tell you my favorite shift on this, because it took me a while. I will say, like, I've learned everything that I use from YouTube. That was pretty cool for me. It's like, for me, it was, I have to do Summit from my living room. Like, how am I going to make this work? And the fact that I could go look on YouTube and get detailed setups, what people use, was pretty awesome. This was probably like my one innovation type area. So for anyone that has struggled with this, I use a teleprompter now for my secondary display. And the problem, that's an easy thing to start on, but the problem is when you do a teleprompter, all of the text is mirrored, so you can't read anything.
Oh yeah.
And whereas on Linux, like with things like xrandr, you can actually flip the screen.
Mhm.
These days, I spend a lot of time on my Mac because of all of the,
Attachments.
Zoom,
Yeah.
Microsoft Teams, whatever we have to be in. And unfortunately, Apple doesn't support an X-Render equivalent. They have X-Render type things, but it won't mirror the screen. And there's a
Mm.
company called it's Luna Display that will actually drive an iPad as your second monitor, and then it will teleprompter mirror the text. And so I'm looking at you actually
Ooh.
in a teleprompter right now. So if you were going to ask me really tough, like financial questions, I could just put notes right over the screen and have all of the
Nice.
details. But that was my latest shift and gear that helps me sort of look in the camera and makes it easier to talk to somebody. You have eye contact there, but
Mhm.
that was the latest one. I don't know what comes next. I'm always sort of tweaking something.
Yeah, I'm the same way, right? Like, because I stream a lot, obviously, and you sit at home and you appreciate a good streaming setup. So yeah, like I don't know what the next thing for me either is because there's like a lot of little things I could go grab to tweak. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's interesting. I like that, and I found the Luna Display website, so I might look at getting one of those. So we'll see. Um, so the this year 2020, right, like COVID aside, I feel like, me personally, I feel like it was the year that edge and 5G got real because we're starting to see some of those deployments happen, whereas I think 2019, 2018, people were like, okay right, like, okay, edge is coming, we get it, 5G is coming, we get it. So, how are we readying ourselves? And we're already kind of there, I feel like, for this brave new world where compute is actually moving closer to the data and bandwidth will become abundantly available. And we're going to see more processing happening like at the sensor level, and then aggregate data to get shipped back, in mass kind of deal, right? From everything, your toaster to your car and everything else, right?
Yeah.
So how do you feel like we've positioned ourselves to better that, environment going forward?
Yeah, we spent a lot in terms of like where we focus, but I'll tell you my like where 5G has certainly gotten real is I live in Boston. I walked
Right.
out my door the other day
Yeah.
and my phone said 5G.
Right. Same here. Like it happens to me here in Detroit. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that actually is, because I knew the spots that I could go to and actually get
Mhm.
walking out in front of your place and having 5G access. That was like, wow, this really is coming. Like this
This is a
rollout's coming.
thing. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think for Red Hat, I tend to look at a couple different areas. The first is really understanding telecommunications. Like we've spent a lot. You'll hear it at Summit. We had Verizon talk last Summit,
Mhm.
and the reason for that, like, it's one thing to say, yeah, we want to be part of 5G. Um, it's another to be able to go on like, well, there's 5G vRAN and 5G core, and most of the initial 5G deployments are coupling into 4G core. And how
Right.
credible are we in that world? And so going back, this dates back a few years, really with OpenStack for us. It was get into the telcos on the network side and understand what they're doing, just so we could be
Yeah.
relevant in that space. Which ended up being a good bet because like that was before anyone I think really knew whether 5G was going to happen or not.
Right. Right.
But we have that, and then I think the next area becomes devices. And if you go within the world of devices, I think a
There's
pretty
so
key
many.
technology there is ARM.
Mhm.
Because there's some standardization. Devices are really tough when there's 85 million of them, and like what we do in RHEL and Linux, like it's just hard to scale when there are an infinite number of hardware platforms.
Right.
Things like ARM have really started to help that because then we can do our investment in a few areas and actually have a chance in devices. Uh, then I think the next thing that's starting to shift is you could put it like NVIDIA's DPU type announcement
Yeah.
of, man, like it's not just so devices are changing where it's not just like one thing anymore. Compute's getting offloaded to all of the things that
Everything.
do
Yeah.
IO, and servers are also changing with that. So
Mhm.
within this, like compute's moving, compute's also getting sort of decentralized. I don't know the best way to
Right. Yeah.
describe it.
Democratized, I think, is what I wrote in our notes here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's really and I think being a part of all of those of like your it's a little inception like to like, well, you're running a tiny computer that's running a tiny computer on the networking card, and you've got to coordinate those two. But if you do it well, I describe it to people like it's sort of, I grew up in the e-commerce internet potential, and I
Yeah.
feel like we're getting to go through that all over again. I'm like, this combination of crazy powerful devices, unlimited bandwidth, 5G. It's like, yeah, hopefully it'll make cars drive itself. Like that's sort of known.
Yeah, like
But
that's
I
kind of
think,
the future, right? Yeah.
yeah, a lot of other stuff's going to happen that we just haven't thought of yet that will.
Oh yeah.
But
We're
those are sort of the prongs for me. It's like no telecommunications well, so we can actually help influence it and be on the device edge side for that, whether it's factories or cars or RAN boxes. And then it's also don't lose sight of this compute change that's happening as well, whether it's AWS Nitro or NVIDIA DPUs. It's shown to be effective, and that circles back to ARM and being able to understand that and influence it.
Yeah, I have a deep love for ARM and have had for years. So yeah, it's funny, we compare like cell phones, smartphones to like, oh yeah, my cell phone's more powerful than the entire like Apollo program computing wise, right? Like I think we've already passed the point where the compute was more powerful than the shuttle program, right? Like and it's happened so quickly, right? Like and I forget the author, but he wrote a book about how technology, like ever since 2007, basically, when computing got pretty cheap, thanks to Intel and things like ARM, technology is advancing exponentially almost every year, right? And we're seeing this huge uptick in just change, like constant transformation almost is what it feels like. And a big part of that, I feel like, is Kubernetes. And, we made a large bet on Kubernetes, right? And it came on the scene, and it democratized compute in ways I don't think that even the creators thought were possible, which I think is awesome. It's a fundamental part of the thing that I work on every day, OpenShift. What doors have you seen Kubernetes and OpenShift open for folks, right? Like that democratization has done something already. What have you seen that's been interesting about OpenShift users or, just Kubernetes in general?
Yeah, I know my moment with OpenShift. If I take a step back, it's like I sort of grew up in the world of 3-tier apps, and if you were lucky enough to be successful, your whole challenge in life was scaling them. Like how are you going to scale this? And the groups we were scaling them for were so tiny back then, and yet it was still sort of a major challenge in it. And when I think of Kubernetes, it's sort of this like, Linux has this amazing potential for sort of a single box. And then your next challenge becomes, how do you take all of those boxes, whether they're cell phones or tiny ARM devices or they're 1U, 2U servers, and make them work as sort of a single unit? And I would say like we sort of got that up front with Kubernetes. It was like, well, this is really going to work. I don't know. Like there's been a bunch of attempts to distribute computing. And for me, it was when I was actually sitting at Summit. Customer I know really well is Amadeus. And I think it was Dietmar himself who was presenting, who we went back for years. And at Summit, I've reviewed this stuff 1,000 times. So I'm just sort of hoping everybody goes well. And in his talk, he said, and I believe it was, they're doing 1 trillion transactions a day running on OpenShift. And I remember like, I stopped because I was like, I know that was a T. Like, I'm pretty sure he didn't have a B in that. Like 1 billion would have blown my mind. And the fact, like just the sheer volume and scale. And I knew some about Amadeus of like, they run hot data centers. Like it's not just a brute force scaling. Like they do this in an incredibly resilient manner. That was my like, wow, we're never going back. Like if this is what you can accomplish with OpenShift and sort of that distributed computing, it's going to change all of the ways that we build applications just to take out that scale challenge. So that I remember that I could probably tell you within a few seats of like where I was sitting there, but that was my OpenShift moment of like, I didn't know that would even be possible to accomplish like that. that large of a use case on the platform. But man, it felt good. It was cool.
Yeah. A trillion of anything is cool,
Yeah.
especially when it's running on your system,
Yeah.
or software you help build and contribute to. Yeah, that's awesome. That's truly amazing when you think about it. And that that company, right, like Amadeus has such a critical role, and those transactions are very, very important that they actually
Yeah.
occur and correctly happen, right? And it's like, yeah, the fact they've scaled out a system to do that to a trillion is rather impressive.
Yeah.
So the other piece of news that people generally ask about, and there's a question in chat about getting OpenShift working on Raspberry Pis, and that in and of itself is kind of like not a use case OpenShift is for, but there is this thing called OKD. You can run Fedora on a Raspberry Pi now. If you want to try out OKD on a Raspberry Pi, I know I've stood up Kubernetes clusters with Raspberry Pis. I'm not sure about OKD on Raspberry Pis.
Yeah.
I don't know yet. But maybe that is my end of year like hobby tinkering project thingy. But
Yeah.
I have some Raspberry Pis laying around. So next question, and this is a question that I always get, always from family members, from everybody. My wife's grandfather's asked me this before. How has the IBM acquisition impacted you and the organization? Because for me, it's like nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Right. Like if anything, it's like ramped up what I do. Right. Like it's added more, and like there's more to do. So how has it impacted you specifically?
Yeah, I think the IBM one was an interesting one for me because I was at IBM before Red Hat. Like I'm a 15-year boomerang that came back in, and so part of it was I had this somewhat dated view of IBM from the teams that I was working on the position there, and
interesting.
I'll be honest, like.
Yeah. I mean, 15 years is a big gap, right?
15 years is a huge gap. Rungs and rungs of leadership had changed at that point. And I had a great impression of Arvin. Actually, it was a few years ago. Arvin and I were on stage at Summit announcing our partnership around OpenShift. And this was prior to the acquisition. So I was like, okay, like I know this guy and he's really good. Like I told Arvin after, I was like, it was one of the easiest candor and announcements that I had on it. So I had a positive impression going in, but I will commend IBM on, they've done such a good job at not just leaving us alone. Like it's one thing to say, you're part of the portfolio, we'll just sort of leave you over here. But the focus on like, we're going to let you be independent, but we're going to amplify what you do. It is at times exhilarating and exhausting. Of like what that means in my life is having a almost 400,000 person company ready to help and jump in and talk about partnering and bundling agreements and all of these things. But I would say like the undertone is it has almost all been positive in the sense of like, how do we respect what Red Hat does. We appreciate it. We see it's very critical. We want to help on it. And so it's been totally exhausting in the sense of we're 16,000 person company joining a like 400,000 person machine. And I'm in a role where a lot of the decisions
exponentially huger.
Yeah, no, it really is. And like, and when we talk about products and technologies, a lot of my job is to say like, yes, that structure or deal makes sense, or no, it doesn't. And in those cases, a lot of it is also explaining open source and how we work and why something might make sense and why something won't. But I've loved it. Like it really has been a phenomenon. I don't want to say surprisingly phenomenal, but given my expectation of IBM, which is big, and sometimes, when I was there, you adapted to IBM, not vice versa. It's been refreshing just to see like IBM really embrace and adapt in a lot of cases to Red Hat style, which has been great. But it has made for a very busy year on top of COVID and being home and learning to talk into a teleprompter all day. But it's good challenges to have.
Yeah, it is good challenges. And like, I think one of the best examples is when we decided to live stream, we reached out to our friends at IBM, right? Like they were doing live streaming and we are like, hey, can you help us, kind of shortcut some stuff because we're looking to do this too. And they were like, absolutely, we're here to help. Let's sit down, let's talk. Literally, their streaming team had a meeting with my whole team. It was awesome, right? Like we got all kinds of information that really just kind of short fused our release on the live streaming bit. So that was super, super helpful. And that's my example of how they've helped us scale and everything. What are some of the challenges you see going ahead in the future, right? Like 2021 is upon us. Thank you. 2020 is over. But what are those things that you see on the horizon that we're going to tackle?
Yeah, I think, well, there's the stuff right in front of us, which is like, let's assume for a minute, everybody gets vaccinated and this is sort of behind us. Like, I know if you're in the States, like it's hard to get your mind around that quite now, but let's assume this is behind us. We have the immediate question, which is like, do we go back to offices? Like, what do we actually change? What do we do? Like, what do we use our offices for? Do we immediately revert back into the like, throw people in planes and go work an issue on site for a customer? Or are these new ways of working better? So I think we have that's not just going to be a challenge for Red Hat. That'll be across the whole industry of like, I can't think of a time where everyone's sort of taking a moment to reinvent themselves a little bit and find that new balance. And that's just impactful, in terms of like what you're doing with leases and buildings and remote workers and an office and how you support it. So I think there's going to be a big challenge as we regroup to that. And then I think, and this probably isn't a 2021 thing, but we talked about this a little with like 5G changing the world of how people interact with customers. There are a lot of customers going through like, it's a disruption risk. Like, if I don't focus on this, is my whole business going to get overturned because somebody does it better? And this was like an IBM moment for me. Right after 5G, one of the best things with acquisition, I had the opportunity to go to Yorktown to the research labs and stand next to a working quantum computer that was processing, and it looks like an alcohol still, like it's copper wires and stuff.
What's that even like?
And this, you're standing next to it and they're rattling off all these stats. Like, this is running a hair's width off of absolute zero. Just things like in school didn't seem like they were ever be possible. And this didn't have machines the size of a building hooked up to it. I mean, it was a quite elegant machine. And you start going through like how disruptive that will be as like the next phase of compute. And I think a lot of companies, as they go back into this plan, there's this acceleration curve. It's like, look, 5G is happening like really, really right now. This device power thing that we could sort of ignore for a pretty long time, like whether it's ARM or DPUs or some of the crazy work like NVIDIA is doing, that's happening like right now. And by the time you land from that, we have things like quantum that you can say maybe it's just tied to like how machine learning works, but they're going to upend everything again. Like when I spent my dive into QuizKit, like, let me apply what I know to quantum. Like none of it applies. It's all, I did computer engineering in school. Right. And I felt like I was going back to like a weird VHDL type circuit design. And I think there is a challenge, like there's so many technology disruption waves on the horizon. It can be a little bit hard to plan because companies plan for how do they not get disrupted with technology. And man, it's just tough to understand where you're going to put your next stake in the ground. Like, is your gamble on 5G? Is your gamble on quantum? Is your gamble on AI? If you can't bet on all of them, what do you do? But that I think will be an upcoming challenge. I mean, for us, we try to focus a lot on like, if you bet on Red Hat, if you bet on OpenShift, uh, we can help bridge you into these technologies, because you have to make some short-term bets. And like, whether it's 5G, like we can help bring you to 5G, because we will spend the thousands of engineers working on this. And if it's AI, like we can bring you to AI. If it's like, as quantum matures, like we will bring you through OpenShift to QuizKit to those, augmentation. But I think that'll be a real customer challenge. Like, we just got out of a global pandemic, and this technology evolution does not stop. Like, I don't even get 1 year off. It's just like constant shift and challenges. So I think there'll be a little of that, as my guess, next year as well.
Yeah, we're already seeing some people talking about like quantum, quantum safe cryptography and
Yeah.
all the things that are gonna, come with that age. We need to be
Yep.
ready for it, like before it happens, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're encrypting things with, DES or whatever, something way archaic, right? Like
Yep.
overnight, your thing will be cracked by a quantum computer, and
Yep.
like that, I think is awesome. Like awesomely powerful computing can also be very scary to some people.
Very
So like
terrifying.
having to make that transition is going to be very interesting. And like I know some people in the Qiskit team, they're awesome. They're doing a really great job of trying to, help developers, take what they have and
Yep.
get to where they need to be, right? Like and that's going to be a transition for all of us, right? Like just like 64-bit computing was, but like on steroids, it feels like.
Yeah. No, it is. And it's one of those things like, it's both a disruptor and an amplifier. Like, cause I worry a little bit of like, I don't know how much people think like, well, if SSL just goes away, or it's not secure anymore, like how much does that upend in what we've come to build on? And that
Right.
I've been happy. I'm like, I think before that's a reality, we'll have approaches, but that's a disruptive change. And then on the other side, I'm like, what if probability based like machine learning training just happens instantaneously? Like, it's sort of equally exciting, equally terrifying. Like, whoa, these are big changes. Like 64-bit for me, it's like those worlds lived in parallel for a pretty long
A long
time.
time,
Like transition took a while. These are things that, like you just watch the qubit progression and the noise reduction. It's like, this is happening. And like, when you get over that, when you get to a certain point, there is no like use in the parallel worlds for it. Like it is,
Right.
compute shifts to it. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. Like, if I picked one thing, it's like, how do we help customers make bets now without just hitting paralysis on this? Like, because I think for most customers, like I'm an engineer. I love being at Red Hat because we're in the middle of this stuff. A lot of our customers are like, look, we're just trying to do banking better. Like, I don't even have time to understand what you're talking about with quantum upending encryption. Like, I need bank transfers or stock purchases or car rides to go smoother. And so I love Red Hat's role there. And like, what can you bet on or sort of rely on today that like these things are still going to happen, and how can we help you take advantage of them instead of being this like looming fear of like some startup is going to use this and Airbnb me or whatever. I think there's a lot of power in open source, in things like OpenShift, to put customers on a good path, to like look at it positively, not in a fear-based light.
Yeah, I think that's probably some people. I think a lot of us were waiting for the day, right? Like that quantum's going to take over, right? So, I mean, a quantum laptop, I just keep thinking about it. It's like, that's going to happen. And it's like, how does that happen, right? Like there's all this stuff that has to change to make that happen. And it's going to be so wild to just be part of it, right?
Yep.
So it's not scary to me. It's like, I'm excited for it, right? Like I'm ready to bring it on, but I work in tech. And so it's, I kind of understand it, right? Like I know Chris Morgan knows way more about it than I do. So if I had questions, I can go ask him. So there's always that. The struggle I think people are going to have though is where do I use it first, right?
Yep.
Like what applications are going to benefit most from quantum? And that's where I kind of get fuzzy, right? Like I'm not sure if it's stock trading or if it's, what kind of compute workload gets thrown on quantum. I have no idea, right? Like is it the
Yeah.
stuff we're throwing at GPUs now?
Yeah.
What gets processed on a quantum computer? Is it genomics? Is it medications? I don't know.
Yeah. Now that it is yeah, I've thought a lot about like um, what are the probability based problems? Like what problem are you comfortable saying like, if you can tell me really fast that this is like 99% chance this is right, what does that change in how we do computing? And it for me, it's sort of like the 5G thing. Like I know a lot is going to change with that moment. Someone described quantum to me, I think, very elegantly when we were there. It's like, the way classical computing works, if you have a table and you want to find the low spot, we take like a marble and we run it down the table and we move a little bit and run it, and move it and run it. And you roll that same marble a lot of times, but definitively, you're like the low spot is right there on the table, guaranteed. Um, Quantum, through like insert the mind-blowing universe of maybe using parallel universes, dumps a billion marbles on the table at the same time and says, there's a really, really high likelihood that this is the low spot because all these marbles gravitated there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to have that same precision, but it's fast in doing
Right.
that. And for me, I'm like, I've had the same challenge. I'm like, wow. Or it's the same thing of take 5G and say, if you have real-time latency and like infinite bandwidth, what would you build with it? And I will say, like, I'm probably not the most creative person to like think of that thing.
Right.
But I
Like,
know the moments where I'm like, wow, people are going to do crazy stuff with this. And I'm an optimist. I'm similar to you. I'm like, it's going to be crazy good. Like it'll be hard to like ride that wave, but I'm excited. I think more good than bad will come out of it. But it's wild to be living through this time where like we're going to have a few of these
Right.
in our lifetime on this, where it's pretty cool, and probably a few more that we don't even have on the horizon.
Realize are going to happen as a result of the things in the future. Yeah, it's like, how do you predict the future? Well, you can't, but you can to an extent. You can kind of get an idea of it, and that's what we're all about here, is trying to help people, figure out where to go in the future. Is there anything you want to like just contribute to the conversation, or just say before we, sign off to everybody and, wish everybody a happy new year and everything?
Yeah, well, I would say, I think there's a lot of power. I probably would have never been on the show or been streaming or had like a YouTube setup for that. And I've really, that's been like one of my COVID things. There's a lot of power in this model. Arguably, I was an in-person presenter, like get on stage, connect with people in person.
Exactly. You feel the audience energy, everything coming in. Yeah.
I loved it. But I actually think there's probably more potential in this. So like I will say to like everybody that was doing this long before I had any appreciation or really dove into it, that's that type of innovation that I think it's inspiring to me. So thanks for that. Anyone that posted their microphone or video setups, like thanks for that as well. It makes it
same. Yeah, exactly.
But I always like 2020 has been a pretty like tough year in all regards, but like finding some positive aspect out of like what can we take away from it? What can we change? What can we do better? Not just in the tech side, but like how we interact with global teams. I think there are a lot of positive learnings that we can take out of it as well. So so I appreciate you doing this stuff. I appreciate everybody that was way ahead of us in doing it as well. And I sure hope 2021 is going to be a smoother year.
I do too. And, thank you to everyone that has live streamed before I did. Same sentiment, right? Like I've learned so much from all of you, right? Like I've watched stream after stream after stream, trying to learn, new things, new ways to do things, or better ways to communicate on certain mediums or platforms. And just thank you all so much, right? Like live streaming has been my job since May basically, and it has gotten me through COVID, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
Like you say
Yeah.
it's your COVID thing, it's same for me, right? But it's actually my job to kind of put the content and the channel together. So it's been it's a new learning experience for everyone, I feel like. But it has been, it has created virtual events that create some accessibility, right? Like
Yeah.
we've seen virtual events go, you know, from physical to virtual overnight kind of deal, right? And live streaming, I think, is the next evolution of the virtual event, right? Like we're
Yeah.
going to have to incorporate some kind of live element to it, right? Like we can't have 100% pre-baked talks and then just
Yep.
have the speakers sitting in the room afterwards, right? Like there's gonna be a lack of appreciation for that kind of interaction from the speaker side, I think. And doing it live has a much more tactile feel to it.
Yeah.
Even if you are talking into a camera lens, I'm still getting feedback from the audience in chat and you and everybody else that might be tuned in on the back channel kind of deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to thank you for joining us for the last show of the year.
Thanks for
In
having
the
me. And
clouds, and
yeah, great work on the series too. It's
thank you so much. It has been a team effort. I have to thank my boss Chris Morgan for like putting together the schedule. It's just an amazing season one schedule, just in general with the people that we interviewed, right? Like, so thank you very much to Chris Morgan for that, and thank you for being the end cap on the year for us. And really
happy to do
appreciate
it.
the conversation today. So thank you very much, and stay safe out there, everybody. Stay healthy. Have a good time but stay healthy. Happy New Year. Happy holidays to everybody. And we'll catch you on the flip side in 2021.
See ya.